Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Suzy Wraines. How are you today, Suzy?
I'm great, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me on.
Wonderful. I am looking forward to this conversation. I cannot wait for the listeners to hear it as well. Suzy, you are the founder and owner of Starting a Business Simplified. And I love this concept because starting a business can seem really overwhelming. But additionally, you are a certified trauma energetics coach. And we're going to really talk about how this plays into starting and running a business. And so, again, welcome to the show. And I am so excited.
Thank you so much, Desiree. Yeah, it does play a huge role when you're getting started. And that's my story. So we'll get into all that in the episode. I'm excited to share it.
Yeah. I always love to have my guests tell us what was the journey like for you? Like, what was your path? How did you end up here? You're a podcast host as well, and you are helping others to understand how to start a business simply. So tell us how that all came to be for you.
I love telling my story. And I'm going to say this to the listeners. Okay, for people out there listening, if you're thinking about starting a business or you just started a business, we don't realize how much our healing path is in alignment with being an entrepreneur. We think it's about doing things, but it's really about being. And I think that that's the beginning of my story is I was doing. So I do have a degree in business administration and did corporate work many years ago. Then I joined the Army and I was a medic in the Army. I learned the medical side of things as well as very structured, directional in like do. Again, very masculine energy. For those of you that are listening and follow the feminine masculine energy things, it's doing the things. So when I thought about starting my own business, it was like, how do I do this? So I started thinking about all the doing pieces and I got certified as a health and life coach. And I'm like, I'm going to be a health coach. That's easy, medical side, I can do this. The one thing I didn't realize was that there's no book out there for a singlepreneur, like one person that wants to take on the task of starting a business. What's out there is for larger, I'm going to go get a small business loan and hire my C-suite and I'm going to hire my staff and I'm going to hire all these people they have all of this expertise. They're going to do their things and then I'm going to pay the loan back. I'm going to generate enough income to pay the loan back. And so it kept coming to me, business planning, like something's missing. And I was struggling. And I'm like, how am I struggling? I have a degree in business. I understand how it works from a big corporation structure. I never started one myself. I don't know what that looks. I don't know what it looks like to just do this by myself. So I got scared and I went back to work. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm just going to go back to work. I went and worked for a corporation doing health coaching, hated it, hated doing health. Health wasn't the part that I loved. Business is what I love. That's why I do what I do. And so I started to think about it and I was like, if I struggled and I understand business and I worked in corporate and I get it. If I was struggling, then how many other people out there who want to start their own business that want to self-fund? They just want to invest their own money. They don't need a loan. They don't need investors. They're like, I just want to do a thing on the side. I just want to figure it out. What do they do? So I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to put something together. So I made a checklist for myself and it turned into a workbook. And then the workbook I sold on Amazon. And then I started giving it to people to get feedback. I was like, can you do this workbook? Tell me what you think. And they're like, I love this. This is so perfect, but I need somebody to help me walk through the workbook. As you know, Desiree, because you're a business owner, there really isn't anything simple about a business. It is a moving machine, like moving parts all the time, all the different things. You're learning constantly. You're having to make changes, shift, do all these things. And so people would get into the workbook and they would get stuck on the questions that were being asked. Who are you talking to? Big old question mark. Well, everybody, of course. No, you're not talking to everybody. You're talking to certain people. What are you selling? Well, I have all these ideas and like this big list of it. So the feedback I got was they needed coaching. And so I was like, okay, step 2, add a coaching program. So again, and I'm going back to the doing. I was doing all these things and I wasn't growing. I wasn't growing my business. I was kind of in this learning slash healing, not knowing the missing piece was my own past trauma. In my mind, I knew what I was doing. I was doing the things. People were telling me what they needed, but nobody was hiring me. And I'm like, why isn't anybody hiring me? Because I was in the mode of doing and I wasn't open. So I was resisting energetically, resisting receiving. I was resisting bringing on new people in several different ways. And I'll give you some examples of that later. But so through starting a business simplified, it was my podcast was kind of my first, it's about 2 years ago when I hit record. And it was because I was looking for podcasts to be on and I couldn't find any that really resonated with me. And I was like, I'm just going to do it myself then. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I just hit record. I found it. Spotify was free at the time. I'm like, here we go. We're just going to go without really having a foundation. And that's been my business for me. And I was like, people need structure. There is a structure component to being a business owner. You can do fly by the seat of your pants and do all the things, but there does have to be some, it's more important to have them in place. So this is where I created an actual mentorship program that walks people through the first year of being a business owner. And that has evolved and was launched this year. So 2.5 years in business, and I'm just now figuring it out, just to let you guys know. But I'm figuring it out so other people don't have to struggle. And I think that's the biggest message. When people want to start a business, they're actually helping people with something that they themselves struggled with to shorten the time span for people and for them to be able to move forward faster. So the last year has been my healing process. And I got certified last year for trauma energetics coaching, which is the limiting belief part where you could fill out the workbook, but when you get to a question, who is it that your service is for? And if you have residual defensive patterns happening in your nervous system from a childhood development trauma or a past trauma or anything of that nature, you won't be able to answer the question. You will be protecting yourself. So your nervous system is just going to go, we're going to keep you safe and not give you that answer so that you can't move forward. So then you're not going to get a whole bunch of clients because it's not safe. So it's figuring out where's that root of fear, that what happened for me, it was speaking up. When I was a kid, my brother made fun of me. He was older. He was like 6 years older, being a kid, but he would make fun of me. He'd make fun of how I talked. He would make fun of me if I cried. I learned really fast that it's not safe to speak up and to be who I am. So learning that through my own work with my own trauma coach, I got rid of it. And I was like, ooh, my clients need this. Because now all of a sudden I was saying things in my messaging on my podcast with my clients. And they're like, that's really helpful that you shared that. And not necessarily details of like all the nitty gritty things that happen, but it's just being open. When we're open and authentic in a safe space in a way that helps other people, then people thrive. And that was what was missing. I was like, here, do this work, fill out this workbook. Let's do this. Let's get your business off the ground without the healing component. And so people are like, I don't know why I'm procrastinating. I don't know why I'm putting things off. I don't understand. So hopefully that answers, it's a long answer, but my journey was a long one.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Suzy. And really, there was some points in there that I want to touch on. And it sounds like you may have heard the expression, write the book that you want to read. It's like you were doing the thing that you needed. And then therefore it's going to help other people too. Right. And so that's fantastic. I think anytime that we can kind of pave the path for others to make it easier to do what they want to do, because you've laid that foundation, if you will, or you've paved that road, I think that's fantastic. And so doing that work yourself allowed you to really be open to helping other people. And so I think that's fantastic. And I can totally relate to doing all the things, right? Doing all the things instead of really looking at what could be underlying that's causing you to procrastinate or put things off, until the last second, again, procrastinating. And so that's a fantastic point. Yeah, thank you for sharing that your journey and your story. I think probably many people can relate to that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned was the energy component. So I come from a medical background and I understood fight, flight, and freeze. And a lot of coaches will talk about that. It is a nervous system response and it physiologically changes your body. But there's the subconscious involved in that as well. And then the energy piece, I've been learning about that for the last few years, that we have a energy field around us. And this is a scientific fact. And what we put out makes a difference. So if we are constantly guarded, and that's the receiving piece, an example I like to give for that is I met my bookkeeper last year and I love her. And I was like, I'm going to hire you when I get really busy. Cause I'm like, I'm doing my own bookkeeping. I'm fine doing it. I understand how to do it. And I'm like, I'm not going to hire you till I'm like sustainable. Like I have steady income because I'm going to have to put that out every month. She's like, okay. And I'm like, I'm hiring you. What I didn't realize is that by not hiring her, energetically, I was saying, I don't want any more clients because subconsciously, more clients meant more work for me to do my own bookkeeping. So intellectually, I was like, I want more clients. And energetically, I was like, please don't get me more clients because then I have to manage my books. So as soon as I hired her and I let that go and I was like, oh, I don't have to manage my books anymore. I got 4 new clients within a matter of weeks because I shifted my energy, which I didn't realize I was even doing until I actually looked at it and I went, huh, if I wasn't doing bookkeeping, then I would be open to having more business.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it for sure. And I totally agree with this, the energy that we are putting out and what that means for what people are then receiving from that energy you're putting out. And so I love that idea. I totally agree with it. But so let's talk about then, because it sounds like it's multifaceted. Yes, there's pieces of starting a business, there's steps that you can take, but there's also this work internally that you need to do also. So why don't we talk a little bit more about how those kind of go together, but like what the listeners can be doing to sort of unlock some of that.
Yeah. So I started slowing down. So we know that there's a big push with as being a business owner that you have to work all the time. Like you should be available all the time. You might miss a client, you might miss somebody that wants to purchase from you, or you need to be online, or you need to be on social media, all these things happening. One of the things that I recommend, and I started practicing this last year, so for about the last 12 months, slowing down and being intentional. So I'm going to take something from the big corporations, what they do. They do planning. And one day I was like, nobody likes to plan in my mind. I'm sure people do, but you say that and they're like, ooh, planning is manifesting. It's just using the word plan. I just like call it like it is. You're actually visualizing, what do I want to happen? What would I like to happen? And then you're mapping it out. So I always tell people, do that with intention and be silenced to where you can actually feel inspired. So we're going to take action, but we're going to take inspired action. We're not just going to do the things. I'm going to use social media as an example because most people can relate to it. I can have a social media plan, calendar. Okay, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm going to post, whatever. But in those moments, maybe I batch my social media. So I'm going to sit down for 2 hours and I'm going to write up my posts. During that time, I shut everything else off and I really focus in on me. So go internal, listen to yourself. What do I want to say to my audience, the people I'm intentionally reaching out to, in a way like I'm having a conversation with them as if they were my client? How am I speaking? How am I coming across? What is it that I'm wanting to get? What is the point I'm making? Or what is the question that I'm wanting them to ask themselves? And I do this on my podcast with how I do episodes. It's not so much quantity of what you're putting out, it's the quality. And it's a similar concept. So I do meditation. So I meditate in the morning and I always ask, what do I need to focus on today? And then I listen to my inner self. And if I'm having a hard time hearing, that's a red flag that I have something blocked. I have something that needs to be addressed, either by myself or I need to reach out for help and say, hey, When I think about doing a new podcast episode, I'm not getting anything. I'm like hitting my head against the wall, like, what should I say? What should I do? Usually when there's silence and there's no answer, it's because we are purposely shutting it down. There's a fear factor there, or there's something going on there that is holding us back from wanting to do the thing. So what I recommend is just slow down. If you're doing a whole bunch of things, when you get ready to do something, just set a timer. I am going to focus for the next 10 minutes on this social media post, not just try to get it out as fast as you can and then on to the next thing. It's be in the moment, be in that moment of what it is that you're doing. For example, we're recording a podcast. So I'm right here, right now. I'm not thinking about what I have to do after, and I'm not thinking about where I just left. I'm with you, Desiree. And so if we do more of that while we work on our business, because I don't know about you, but 20 tabs open on your computer and you've got your phone going off and like all the things. So I actually close everything down and I set a timer. That way I know the timer is going to go off. So I'm not going to get off track. I'm going to do whatever I can with that one focused point, that intentional thing, do as much as I can in that time. And then I go to the next thing. So it's okay to multitask. There isn't anything wrong with it. What happens though, is we don't put as much quality into the things we're doing.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think it's very easy to get distracted. It's so incredibly easy to get distracted. And when you're trying to do too many things at once, you're right. It's like the quality of anything that you're doing is going to suffer because you're just distracted. You're not focused on the task at hand. And, our brains, it's like there's too many tabs open in our brains. It's not just on our browser windows. There's too many tabs going and there's music playing and whatever. And so I think that's, I don't know if it's probably a problem of current times because we have access to all of this. And so it's really trying to figure out how to dial it back so that you're just focusing on the thing that you're doing, to be intentional, to really give quality time, attention, and information in what you're working on. I think that's a valid point for anybody working on anything, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of the business owner that's like, I want to sell 8 different things. I'm going to dial it back. So this is Business Simplified. I'm going to dial it back and say, what's one that you love so much and you're so good at it? Pick that one thing and start there. And be the most exceptional deliverer of that one thing, to where people know that you're the person that does that thing better than anybody else, and set yourself apart. And that's actually going to give you the success. What happens is we have access to so many things easy. It's easy to do a lot of things now. And so when I get people coming to me and they want to start a business, they're like, I want to do this and this and this and this, and I want to reach all these people. And I'm like, okay, which one out of all of those do you wake up in the morning and you could talk about all day and never get tired? And I actually have an episode on my podcast that talks through these steps. It's from 2023. So I might actually give that to you, Desiree. I'm going to look that up and I'll give it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But it's a kind of a meditation thing, checklist that you can go through. If you think about it all day long, you can talk about it all day long, and it's just who you are. If you feel comfortable and you're always sharing information about it with people and you're helping them just naturally, that's usually the thing. And if you stick with that and you do that one thing, and then you find something that is unique about you, we are all individual. All of us are unique. And there's something about each one of us that stands us out from everybody else. I had a podcast guest. We got on the topic of shoes. How many pairs of shoes are in the world? And how many choices do we have? But they're all shoes. So somebody's going to be like, I feel like wearing a tall boot today. Okay, cool. Well, how many selections of those do we have? I feel like we as individual beings are the same. I'm going to deliver my message and do my coaching different than somebody else. Somebody's going to be in the mood to work with me. Somebody's going to resonate with me because it's me, and nobody else can do it. Just me. So if you're a person thinking about starting a business, it's tapping into, how are you different? Who are you? Like, really? And that's the internal work. I had to figure out who Suzy was. What makes me different than another coach? What makes me different? And not just pitching something different, but me, like they couldn't actually emulate it because it's me.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great stuff, Susie, truly. And I agree with you 100%. There's so many coaches. There's like the topic of anything you think of, you could probably find 15 people talking about it. But it's our experience and our thoughts around it and our knowledge behind it that's a little bit different than somebody else that speaks to the person who needs that. And when we can be still and quiet and take the time, like you said, and really think on those things, reflect on those things. What do we have to offer that's different? And in what way is it different that we can help others to achieve whatever goal they're trying to accomplish? So I 100% agree with all of that. Okay, so let me see where I want to take the conversation. Since we're talking about people who are thinking maybe of starting a business, what would you say the most challenging thing is for that individual who's considering starting a business?
This is my favorite question, and I get it asked all the time. So I'm really comfortable with this question. Talking about who you are and what you do, it's the hardest thing. It's the identity of who you are as a business owner. So, especially for those coming out of working a job, they might still be in working a job. Lots of my clients are still working. They identify as the person in that job. And now I'm going to tell them, you now own this business. You are now the CEO and founder of XYZ. They've never done that before. They don't know who that is. So it's figuring out who is that identity. And again, that's why I'm going to always support and raise the flag for coaches. Coaches have a great place in this because this is where people can become authentic through being vulnerable, sharing what they're struggling with in a safe environment. And that's what the trauma energetics coaching did for me, allowing me to learn where I could speak up, how to speak up, what to say, who am I? So really go through that journey of figuring out who is Suzy, what does she have to share in the world? And once you know that, then you can confidently speak about it. Every person that I talk to that says they want to start a business, I always ask them, okay, what is your business, your business idea? And if they tell me, they give me one, I'm like, perfect. Sometimes I get 4 or 5 and I'm like, which one? We're simplifying. We're going to do one. So they tell me. And then I said, okay, I just met you. So nice to meet you. What is it that you do? They don't know how to answer that question. How can you help me? So using myself as an example, Suzy, I would love to start a business. How is it that you help people do that? 99.9% of the people that I come across that are interested in getting started in a business cannot answer that question.
Yeah, I believe that. And what is it that they always say? Like you should have an elevator pitch, 30-second elevator pitch that tells people exactly what it is that you do and how you help people. Because ultimately it's about solving somebody's problem, right?
Yep. Or starting a conversation. So even having a introduction that makes a person curious.
Mhm.
Oh, I do trauma energetics coaching that helps with limiting beliefs. Tell me more about that. That's interesting. I've never heard of that before. Oh, well, I'm a business foundations coach, and a lot of limiting beliefs come up when people are starting a business. Oh, well, what kind of businesses do you help get started? If you spin it in a way that's curiosity driven, then you get the other person talking and then you can learn more about them. I think we get so caught up in talking at people instead of having a conversation. I want to know more about you. Tell me about you. Tell me about what you want. And I'll give you the information you ask about me, but I'm going to give it to you in a way that talks more about you.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a ninja coaching skill that I've acquired over the years, but it's true. If you ask an open-ended question to somebody, so I'm going to tell you, yeah, I'm a business foundation coach. I use trauma energetics coaching as part of that to help with limiting beliefs. What is it that you struggle with limiting beliefs?
Yeah, that's great. Really, you're absolutely right. If you can draw information out in a way that now you can help with solutions, and that's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. Open-ended questions, always a good idea, right? And this way that you just said, ninja coaching, because you're going to kind of do it in a way that's not head on, like charging. You're going to do it a little bit in a secretive sort of way, but not totally, but it's just in a way that's a little bit less direct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And having those conversations. So this is something that I just started because I needed it. Again, it's always what we need, we create. I created a community of like-minded entrepreneurs, the higher purpose entrepreneur community, for this purpose. I love that you asked this question because people that come in, they're either seasoned entrepreneurs, so they've been doing it for a while, or they're brand new. It doesn't matter. The new ones need practice. They need to be in a safe environment where other people are asking, hey, who are you and what do you do? And it's okay if they stumble over their words. It's okay if they're not clear. It's okay if they don't know for sure, because all the people that are in the community already know that this is a place that's safe, that people aren't going to know everything. We don't have to be polished entrepreneurs at a networking event. We're here as human beings that are just want to grow and get support and all those things. So it came about because I started working with some ladies together, and all of them were saying the same thing. They were like, I love it when we meet once a month. I feel like I grow so much and I can be vulnerable and it's safe. And I was like, community, we need a bigger container that can be fostered. So that actually just happened in the last month. I'm
Oh,
excited about
fantastic.
that one, but yeah, but
Yeah.
it's true. That is the number one thing that I think people struggle with is being able to identify who they are and what they do. And I'm
Yeah. Go ahead.
saying it that way because you have to know who you are first to know what to tell people that you do.
Mhm. Yeah. And you're right. When you can't answer that question or you can't describe what it is that you do, you're not going to say anything. And so what you just shared about having a community where you can be talking with people and sort of practicing this in a place that's safe, then you can work through those kinks and those bugs. And so then when you're out in the wilds, you're not afraid to talk about what it is that you do because now you can explain it. You've thought about it. You've described it before. You've shared the information with people who made you feel comfortable so that you could grow and become confident and sharing that information. And that is a huge game changer for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. Cool. So do you wanna share, is it a closed group? Is it on Facebook or
Yeah, actually it is. It's open to the public. We are spiritually minded. So we do believe in manifesting and universal energy and all of the fun things. And it is actually a school community on the school platform. So I'll share the links with you, Desiree, so you can share it, but it's the higher purpose entrepreneur community.
excellent. Thank you. And I'll include it in the show notes so the listeners can find it because I think that's tremendous. So bravo for starting that and really opening a space up for people who can grow and be a support for others. So I love that. Okay, so you talked earlier about you were in the medical area in the Army, yes? So how does that translate into what you're doing now? Do you work a lot still with people in the medical area, or tell us about it?
Yeah. So this is the part of being a business owner. I went through all the stages as you guys follow along with my story. While I was in the army, I was applying the business stuff that I learned working corporate and my business degree to hospitals I worked in, saving man hours and money and like doing all these things. And I was like, most of the people in medical don't understand business. They don't understand the way that it fits together. And nobody takes money. When you work in a clinical setting, you don't ask people for money when they come to have treatment. Here's your IV. Okay, that'll be $500. Like nobody does that. Well, when I left the army, I actually went back to school and I became a veterinary technician. So I was working in the veterinary world, animal medicine. And I remember the first time I had to check somebody out that was leaving the clinic and they're like, "This is $1,500. How would you like to pay?" And I thought that I was going to die. It's like my heart was racing. I mean, fight, flight, or freeze. I was having all of the anxiety about it while I was figuring out. So again, I wanted to sell to everybody when I first started my business. Here's my workbook. Just everybody can buy it. Anybody and everybody. Go ahead and I'm going to be a millionaire. No. So I was like, what makes me different? How am I different? I'm different because I understand business and I understand medicine. So how do you combine those two? When I left the medical field to start my own business, I struggled with the same frustrations and challenges that most medical professionals will. We have structure in medicine. There was structure in the army, there's structure in medicine, there's protocols for everything. If you make a mistake, someone could die or you could hurt somebody. And so you're on constant fight, flight, or freeze when you're working in a clinical setting. And I was like, I relate to that. I know what that feels like. So I was like, that's the people. Those are my people. Those are the people that I can really help. It's my journey. It's what I've been through. I can talk their language and I understand where they're coming from. About 9 months into my business, I was like, that's it. I work with medical professionals who want to leave their job or leave the healthcare system to start their own business. And that's how that came to be. Again, learning about myself, learning who I am and what I bring to the world.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I really can't say enough about how important it is to learn and understand about who you are from the experiences that you've had and what it can translate to in the future. Really learning about yourself and these experiences that you've gone through helped you determine that these are the types of people that you want to work with. And so that changes everything, right? But I think that this idea of asking for money is not just in the medical field,
Oh, no.
medical professionals. And if you are starting a business, you've got to learn how to ask for money. And if that's a really uncomfortable conversation, you need to explore why that is. So, do you have any thoughts that you want to share on what the listeners who may be struggling with something like that can do?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is programmed in our subconscious and it's programmed in our nervous system. And it's also programmed through the systems that we have in the everyday what we're doing. So I'm going to name two things. First of all, I worked in a grocery store when I was in high school. And so to me, whenever someone spent money, there was a cash register attached to it. And I'm in my 50s, so I understand. I went through the whole like we were still taking real money and checks and not doing the credit card. I mean, I didn't have a credit card. So the concept to me was there had to be a physical thing in between me and the client, me and the customer. The second thing is that when we are going to ask for money, our own personal story comes up. So, how we have interacted with money our whole lives and how we've seen it in the world. I'm working with a client who she had an aha moment about money. She was like, the insurance that her patients pay is more expensive than what she would charge them cash, their deductible. She's like, I can totally do my own thing because people are willing to pay me. They want to work with her. Like she's sought after in what she's doing and she knows that. And her patients are like, I only want to work with you. And they're like, my insurance deductible is sometimes 2 or 3 times what she would charge cash for them to get the same treatment. So a lot of times it's in our mind, we've figured and so I'm going to talk a little bit. This goes into how do you price your things too. Pricing is an illusion. Marketing people know this. You can make something look more or less expensive depending on how you set up the perspective. So again, insurance, people are thinking, "Oh, I have insurance, it's going to cover it." But is it really? Unless you actually do the number crunching to see what the reality of the numbers are, you're going to notice if that's a good decision or a not so good decision in whatever it is you're doing. So a lot of the clients I work with don't like to look at numbers. It freaks them out. And I introduce to them an easy way to do numbers where they go, I can charge more for that. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, and then they feel good about it. But if we have a story in our head of how we've always dealt with numbers, like they need insurance to hire me. That was her story. She's like, they're going to need insurance to hire me. I'm not doing insurance. I'm doing cash only. Her client helped show her that cash only is good. It's going to be fine. So yeah, a lot of it is our story. What are we thinking? And then really look at the numbers. Every time I walk my clients through the spreadsheet that I show them, they go, oh my gosh, I totally can do this. And I'm like, because the story's telling you you can't.
And isn't that so true? I find that so often that's what it boils down to is the stories that we're telling ourselves, the things that we're believing that are not true because it's just been that way forever, right? These stories have been with us forever. And the lessons that we learned growing up about money, maybe the relationship with money, or we didn't talk about money, or we didn't have enough money, all of these stories carry forward and are still like playing in our mind, even if we don't realize they are. And then they
Yep.
influence the decisions that we make about how we're going to price if we're, coaches or if we're therapists or whatever, how we're going to be pricing our service or if it's a product that we've created and developed, how you're going to price that. Because then again, it also goes into worth and this idea of, are we worth that? Is this thing worth that? And so that's, again, those thoughts and the stories and all of that. Great stuff. Really examining those thoughts and those stories, I think makes a big difference.
Knowing who you're selling to.
Mhm.
I have a podcast episode, and of course, I have a podcast episode on a lot of these things. One of the things I describe is a hair salon. You have supercuts. Sorry, supercuts, if I'm talking about you, but they're selling to a certain demographic. They're like, we want you to get in, get out, kids' haircuts, like quick haircuts, whatever. But then you can go to a high-end salon that has master stylists who have 30 plus years of experience and all these schooling things, and they're teaching people how to do, and master colorists. And there's such a broad spectrum of everything. Who do you want to sell to? Because if you want to sell to the high-end salon, you're not going to charge supercut prices. So knowing what your service is and who it's for. And I always tell people this because I get this all the time. And I know anybody that's listening that's like, but I want to help the people who can't afford it. I get that all the time. And what I tell them is I said, charge the people who can, and then set up a program for those who can't. So set up your services, and you're going to talk to the people you know would love to work with you and pay you. They're in that place where they're happy to do it. It's not a problem. It's totally good. And get your business off the ground. Get some money coming in. You can do a percentage into another account that's a charity fund or whatever name fund you want. You can tell your customers that 5% of what you spend on my services goes to this. And then I offer a sliding scale to people who can't afford it. People are happy to help. They want to help. So it's just structure. And that's the business foundation piece. That's what I talk to. And again, I love that you asked the question earlier about how they come together, because it's like, oh, I'm feeling like I want to help people who can't afford it, but I don't feel like I'm worthy and I can't sell that. So we work through all that. And that's the trauma energetics coaching piece. And then we're like, okay, now how do you want to structure your business to ask for the money to do the things that you want to do, and then be confident in it and know that what you're saying is going to resonate with people. So that's what I do.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's awesome. Suzy, thank you for that tip. That was really great too. I think never even, came across my mind to say a percentage is going to go toward helping those who need my services, but maybe can't afford at this level. And the sliding scales, like what they can afford or not, whatever the case may be. I think that's a great idea. And it just made me think of like pro bono work for
Yep.
attorneys, right? So they have these super high paying clients that they're dedicating a lot of time to, but that they have this fund that they're going to help the people who can't afford. And I think that's great, and how you can apply that even to your small business, whatever it may be. And so that's a great tip. Okay, we've talked a couple of times. You've mentioned your podcast. So I really want to get into it now because I want the listeners to check it out also. So it is a weekly show, yes. And I think that it's also starting a business simplified, but it's navigating the shift, right? So that's the title of the show. But tell us more about it. What can the listeners find if they were to check it out?
Yeah. Again, I mentioned that I started my podcast just hitting record. So the beginning episodes, I love that. I want people to go listen because I want them to see the progression of what it's like to start something you know nothing about, that you're just getting going, and then listen today and hear it all the way through. What you're going to hear when you tune into the podcast are business tips from me. So similar to some of the things that I've been referencing to is real life analogies and metaphors of what it is that we're doing in business, marketing, finance, just anything and everything that goes into a business foundation. So I do episodes like that. And I have guests that come on, and my guests come on and share how they got started, their struggles, challenges, examples of what they're doing now. Some of them are brand new and they're like barely getting going, and other ones have been in business for 5+ years. And they have tons of knowledge that they share. So I have those. And then I share my journey. Last year, I did a series, Suzy's Journey, that's on there. And that talks more to my healing. So my process as I was going through it, if some of you listening are like, she's talked about trauma healing and past trauma, the Suzy's Journey on my podcast has the healing that I was going through at that time. And then right now I'm going through the 12 universal laws. So I'm talking about how those are applied in business. Nature has them and they're always there. And then I'm showing that correlation of how you can apply them in business to make things run smoother, manifest however you want, and just be in rhythm with the universal laws.
Cool. I will for sure link the details to the show in the notes for this episode so the listeners can find you and check out. That sounds amazing. I love the idea of remembering that there are seasons, and that every 3, 4 months, everything's changing, right? And it's okay for our businesses to do that too. It's not going to be the same pace all the time. And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It's just the seasonality of things. And so I love that idea. So I'm going to check that out for sure. Okay, let me see. Is there anything else that you want to share for the listener that you maybe haven't said to this point that you really think would be important for them to know?
I'm going to name something that comes up a lot when it comes to trauma energetics coaching. I've run into several people that I tell that I do this and they go, "I don't really have any trauma." I giggle because we were born. For those of you, I mean, everybody knows that you're in a nice warm place and then you end up in this room full of all these people staring at you, freezing cold and bright light shining on you. That is traumatic to your human body. So we all have something, but trauma, I just like to name that because a lot of people associate the word that trauma is like something major that happened in your life. Childhood developmental trauma is through the stages of development and how you perceive the world as a child in different stages. So for those of you that don't know, my brother that I named that made fun of me, that wasn't really considered a trauma. I mean, it wasn't like a major named isolated thing. That was just him being a big brother. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but I perceived it as a threat. So if you think about it, if you sat down and you just, one of my coach friends, dear friend of mine, she does a workshop and I did her workshop and I was like, wow, she had us do chapters of our life. So she took years and she broke them down and she said, okay, between this age and this age, what was happening in your life? And we mapped that out for like the past 40 years. And at the end of it, she said, what were things that you learned or that were gifts in those years based on those circumstances? And for the first time, I was able to look at my life previously without negative. I actually could pick out, oh, this made me stronger, or this made me smarter, or this made me understand this better, or whatever. Where before I would look at it and find everything wrong with it, all the things that went wrong. If you do even small exercises like that, you'll find where you identify, oh, this was traumatic for me. Any negative thing that pops into your head about an event that's happened in your life in the past has some effect on your nervous system. Some of them we let go of really easily and they're gone. But other times, so stressor over time will create a nervous system shutdown. And stress is a big one that people talk about all the time. And what we don't realize as a collective is that we are all walking around with defenses up because we are stressed and we have all these things put on us. We think that's normal. We think that we're functioning fine. But when you start to peel back some of the layers, you go, oh, there that. And that's what being an entrepreneur does.
Yeah, it reveals a lot, a lot, a lot.
Yeah.
Not just the knowledge that you maybe don't have running a business because you've never done it before, but these things that you weren't really recognizing that happen in your life leading up to this point that affect your business. And so, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you talked about trauma not being like a huge event. And so I had another guest on that talked about little T and big T. The little T is like the teasing, kind of thing. But
Mhm.
when you're a child, that feels really big because you have a limited experience of anything else, right? So it feels really big, and it isn't necessarily a big trauma event as we can recognize, but it feels
Yep.
that way when you're a child. So those things do hang on if you let them. And so I think that's a great exercise that you just shared that we can all do. And kind of doesn't maybe have to be as in depth, going that
Mhm.
huge of a time span. Certainly we can look at a set number of years and examine them and see what we discover. So I think that's awesome. Thank you, Susie.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing to keep in mind is that when we're kids, what ends up becoming our normal way of being is a pattern that a strategy to be safe. So for me not speaking up, I did a strategy of just being silent. That was safe. And so I did that from little until last year. And literally, and I'm like, how did I function in the world? Speaking up in a way that it was what I was saying, not just saying something, not just to talk. but to say what was on my heart. So I was functioning because I was talking, but I wasn't speaking from my heart. So being able to speak from my heart and be okay with it and not feel like something bad was going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that again. It's such good stuff. Really, I think there's so much in what you shared today that we can all take a look at and really reflect on and use to find the good things, the lessons that we learned, the things that made us stronger, and
Mhm.
look at those things that maybe are still holding us back, and how can we work through those so that they don't become those limiting things that stop us from achieving what we want. Great stuff.
Thank you. And I know before we hit record, you gave me some idea. I just wanted to share a book that I'm reading right now that is really good with helping to identify some of these things. It's Dr. David Hawkins' Letting Go. And it was a recommend that someone gave me. And I'm actually in it right now. And I'm like, oh, he does a brilliant job of talking through these emotional things that you might be experiencing and some ways that you can do your own understanding of, oh, okay, that's what I can do to help release some of this stuff that's going on. It's been really good for me. I'm only halfway through it now.
Thank you for that recommendation. I will include that in the show notes, and sounds like something I want to check out as well. Good stuff. Is there any other books that you think are beneficial or have been influential for you that you'd want to share with the listeners?
I've probably read 20 so far this year, so I won't go through the entire list. I read every night before I go to bed, so it's pretty easy to get through. I will say anything by Michael Singer, any of his books, Wayne Dyer, any of his books. And so one book that was written by one of the small business owners that I collaborate with, I have it right here. I always have to make sure I get the name right. Discovering Something Greater, Find Joy, Purpose, and Fulfillment on Your Terms. I highly recommend it to really anybody, small business owners. It's written by four ladies that are entrepreneurs. It talks from different areas of their focus in the book. So it's really, really good.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like another great recommendation. I'll include that in the show notes. Are there other podcasts that you want to suggest that the listeners check out?
Podcast wise, there's this podcast that you're listening to, obviously. My podcast is Starting a Business Simplified. I have a collection of podcasts that I circulate through. Right now, I don't have anything I'm currently listening to. I am going to give the recommendation. Anyone listening that has a podcast, and I know, Desiree, you might already do this. I listen to my own podcast. I am surprised, and I recommend this for anybody that is creating anything, writing, video, audio, whatever it is. Read your stuff, watch your stuff, listen to your stuff. You're going to gain more knowledge about who you are and how you're different. If you look at it from not oh my gosh, I could have done that better, but look at it from, oh my gosh, look how amazing that was.
Oh, that's a great suggestion. Thank you for that. Suzy, can you share with the listeners how they can find you if they have questions for you, they want to follow your journey, learn more information about the work that you're doing? How would they be able to do that?
Yeah. So the easiest way to reach me is through my website. It's startingabusinesssimplified.com. And I have all the podcast information on there and all the information about what it is, how I work with clients. I have a newsletter they can sign up. Everything's on the website, so they can go there.
Okay, perfect. And I'm assuming social media links, if you've got
Mhm.
Instagram or Facebook, we'll include the details in the notes, and your website, of course. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And your time and this information has been fantastic. Suzy, thank you again for joining us today and sharing this with us.
Thanks so much, Desiree, for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.